All right, y'all. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this Unit 4 unit preview. It's going to be some things that seem kind of repetitive, but I'll dive into it a little more. But this one should be fairly quick. Not too many new things to introduce. It's really just building off of a lot of what we've already done. So we'll go ahead and get started. So here's the scope and sequence. You guys can just kind of see how it's going to progress once again. And I just always think it's great to kind of look over this just to know like where you're headed, where your kids are headed for next year, and the real reasonings behind what we're doing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So overview of the unit. First, we'll start with like what you all should be spiraling daily. Writing a sentence with a capital first letter, finger spacing, and period. So on this last CA we just had, they didn't really grade for the period, the punctuation piece, nor the spacing. It was more so for that capital first letter, words being spelled correctly and put in the right order. But CA3, they will be definitely grading for the spaces and the periods. So make sure that they're getting in a habit of doing that and self-checking for that as well. Or peer checking if, your class is a fan of that. Also, identifying errors in sentences. We'll dive into this a little bit more in a bit. Being able to write sentences that you orally dictate. We'll also dive into that a little bit more, and writing a sentence about a picture, which we'll dive into more. So what do they need to be able to take away by the end of the unit? They're going to have to be able to identify and decode compound words, write 3 sentences on a given topic, write sentences about an activity that contains multiple steps, edit sentences by adding spaces and punctuations, and then edit sentences by adding details. So yeah, we'll go on and I'll talk a little bit more about what this means specifically. So these daily practice that your kids should be doing. So right here we have the what, the how, and the why. It's just really important for your scholars to know why they're doing something before you get into doing it, just so it kind of sticks. So by the end of the year, like I said, they'll need to be able to create sentences about a picture that'll be tested on CA3. They'll also have to find errors in a sentence, which could have to do with spelling, spacing, punctuation, or upper and lowercase letters. They need to be able to write sentences that are dictated. This needs to be practiced on a daily basis with your scholars. You can have it as a do now, a way to line up before leaving the room, or a morning meeting message. Following this, just make sure you're aggressively monitoring those needs of your scholars. And you might have already seen some of their needs in this past CA we just took. So for morning meeting or morning message, if you do have this in your class, just adding errors in your sentences for scholars to come up and correct would be great. Also modeling how to create sentences with a prompt and having scholars walk you through the checklist for punctuation, spacing, and uppercase letter is something they should definitely be doing. Also having center activities that are aligned to this. So scholars at this point should be able to do this independently, and also doing the multiple sentences independently and being able to read them as well. I think is super important. Your low scholars, you still might just be having them dictate to you what they want to say and kind of giving them the resources. But your high scholars and your medium scholars should definitely be able to write the multiple sentences and read them. And low scholars can also still be using sentence stems, but you should slowly be moving away from using those. And then it's also important to model reading as you create a sentence to make sure it makes sense. So as you are like thinking of a sentence that you want to write, whether it's about a prompt or anything while you're modeling it, just kind of using your finger as you say a word, finding a word, writing that word, because a lot of times I see scholars skipping words, forgetting words. So just making sure they take the time to like make sure they're accurately writing the words, and just going back and rereading is super important. So that's also a form of aggressive monitoring that you want to make sure that you're doing. And that also still helps you with those scholars that are struggling with letter sounds and sight word recognition. But make sure you're continuing to introduce those new sight words for scholars to have more variety in their sentence writing. And, just helping scholars remember to kind of locate where they can find these words, or how to sound. And also, I sent you guys an email just kind of telling you guys like the resources they have in their writing journal of their own personal word wall where they can add words to it. And then that way they're like, if it's not view in good view for some of your scholars, they could just pull it out their desk and use it. So that's also great for them to have and reinforce the words that they know. So adjectives. So scholars should have already been introduced to adjectives in our previous units. However, in this unit, the focus should be mostly about adding adjectives to their writing to make it more exciting. For our low scholars, this may look like just starting with a reteach of what an adjective is and then identifying them in a sentence. For our on-level scholar, this may look like giving them a sentence and then asking them to add an adjective to it. And then for our high scholars, they may create the whole sentence with an adjective and then be asked to identify the adjective that they use. And as they progress in their writing, when they go through revising, they'll be needing to add adjectives to their writing as well. So scholars need to be really comfortable with identifying and using adjectives in their writing. Once again, this is something you can reinforce as you're reading, pulling out, saying, oh, that's an adjective. Or in your morning message, pulling out adjectives. If you added them to your word wall, maybe having a specific way that they notice that word is an adjective, whether it's a specific color or might have a picture next to it to help them remember that. Those are some great ways to kind of reinforce that as well. So CVC words, once again, something that your scholars have already been exposed to. And we know that, we can see this in almost everything that we do. But we want them to be able to, at this point, identify and write the beginning sound in CVC words and the whole word. Like, they should definitely be able to do the whole word. But for those lower scholars, it might just be that beginning sound. And then you might be practicing those vowel sounds with them. Also matching the letters when writing, of course, and that's in everything that they do. And then writing out those orally dictated sentences with CVC words in them. And then, of course, like our high scholars should definitely be going into blends at this point. I know I kind of touch on these in the morning when I do phonics. I've already started kind of introducing mine to some blends that they might have seen in their sight words or that we might come across often in their A and B level books. So making sure like it is okay to expose them to that. It doesn't have to be strict lesson on it, but making sure like that they're aware, just so it's not completely new, but definitely getting towards the middle to end of the year, they'll be exposed to this a lot more. So having scholars just sound those out all the time. Like I said, it will be included in phonics still. Making sure you have those centers that are aligned, and making sure they're using them when you have. Well, when you use your prompts, writing prompts for them, making sure that they just have pictures that are CVC friendly, that the kids could use, such as kid. So that's definitely great to have. And then also for your high scholars, maybe just saying a word such as fish or frog and having them just include it in their writing. So if scholars are still struggling with letter sounds, this might be hard for them. So make sure that they have that down packed before piling that on. That's what I was saying for our low scholars, it might still just be a beginning sound. And then also putting emphasis on the vowel sounds is super important, because I know from this last CA you could kind of tell the scholars still struggle with that. So just making sure you leave time for emphasis on the different vowel sounds and how to differentiate those. But looking at this, I also posted an AML, which I'll kind of preview to you guys now, on what that looks like. In a lesson plan. So this was an investigation lesson that I created with this AML. And it really was just focused on, going around the room, having scholars investigate like a gallery walk of CVC words just posted around the room so they could kind of investigate what is a CVC word. They could even do a sorting where they're sorting by the vowel sound uh, to make sure that they like really grasp the different vowel sounds. So I think that will also be great. But this AML is posted on Blackboard for you all to look at, and just kind of having them investigate different CVC words, how to sound them out, how to create them. And like I said, this could still even go into blends for your higher scholars. So make sure you guys check that out. Compound words. So with this, you're basically just telling scholars, it's basically two words that make a new word, and expose it into this. And the reasoning behind it is finding little words within big words, help them become better readers. They'll have to start doing this a lot, especially as they grow in their reading levels, and their F&P levels. Just making sure that they have the skill down packed is super important. But you don't have to spend a lot of time on this TEK because it's pretty straightforward. But make sure you do review this with them, having them identifying those small words to help them decode and become more fluent readers. It's something you could do once again in morning reading. Continue to model, read aloud when you see a large word, just covering up like half the words, sounding it out piece by piece. And then it's also a really great center to create, and there's a lot of resources on Teachers Pay Teachers for this. So definitely make sure that they are exposed and comfortable with those compound words, and you won't believe the progress you'll see as they're doing more independent reading. Writing on topic. So now that our scholars have really built the skill of writing, now we want to kind of get them doing multiple sentences on a specific topic. So our prompt should look like you will write 3 sentences about the topic, my teacher. They could draw a picture and then describe or tell something that they like about that topic. Scholars have enough vocabulary, letter exposure, and sentence exposure to be able to do this efficiently at this point. So the prompt could simply be told orally, or for more explicit, or not explicit, more just better sentences where you can have like more adjectives. Give them a picture to write about. Scholars can add details and adjectives effortlessly when you do that. And sometimes you may need to prompt them by asking what they see or think to get them started with creating those sentences, or even having them share with a partner what they think or see and then writing it down. And then relating these prompts to real life experiences will also help to push their thinking. And journal days are like the perfect days to do this. So writing on topic, make sure you start introducing this. And it's so great to see like all the things that they've picked up over the year. It's really exciting. So yeah, definitely make sure you guys get started on this as soon as possible. That could even look like talking about what they did over the break, and you'll just be so surprised with like how much they can do now. It's great. Sequencing, once again, we've talked about this in previous units, but moving forward in this unit, they should not only be able to retell a story in sequential order. They should also be able to start creating one, such as a step-by-step story. I tested this out with my scholars by asking them to tell me how to make a bowl of cereal, which they started out by drawing a picture of each step and then writing a sentence for each step. And I kind of gave them a paper that was in 4s, so they had a 4-step process, and then basically told me what they drew in each picture. So it could also be something such as how they get ready in the morning, and things like that. For low scholars, you may just have them dictate these to you. For our on-level scholars, it may be just drawing those steps, and maybe writing 1 sentence. And then for our high scholars, they should actually be forming these sentences efficiently. So writing process. We've already introduced journals, or you should have already introduced journals. And now that they are writing and using in these, they should be becoming more independent and getting in the swing of the writing process on their own. We want them to build that stamina and love the writing, but make sure definitely with them coming back from the break that we are modeling a lot. And having a topic for them to write about, or that picture prompt. And then just having them go and write. This will just be brainstorming and maybe writing a beginning. Day 2, adding a middle. Day 3, adding an ending and checking for that sentence structure, the period, the uppercase letter, punctuation, spaces, all of that good stuff. And then day 4, we want to start adding those details and checking for errors. And then day 5, finishing up and starting to share out. Have scholar meetings throughout the week to talk about what they need to work on, and then even communicating that with parents at home. So definitely get in the swing of making this a habit throughout the week, and just let me know for their writing in their journals and story writing in general. So make sure you guys check this out if you need any help or ideas on what that would look like. And then just contact me with any questions you may have. But like I said, it's really fun for them, and it's really good to see their growth throughout the year. Scholars are having, or any ideas that you may have for like next office hours. I've heard from a few of you and gave you all some ideas. Also, if there's something working really well in your class, I would love to hear about that as well and share it with the rest of our cohort.